to ask the question that I think a lot of people tend to face, and not just even in the machine learning space. And that's the question of at what point am I a senior engineer? At what point, am I a intermediate engineer? At what point am I still a junior engineer? So I'm going to ask this question this way: what set of skills or what do they need to know, right, to become or to be able to go for an intermediate role, right, as a machine learning engineer, for example? And what set of skills, what do they need to know to go for a senior machine learning engineering role? First off, they see the roles before they apply to it, and if you feel like you are not yet there, obviously you're not going to apply to it. So how do they get to the point where they are there?
Frankly, I don't know. um, I remember about 10, 11 years ago when someone called me a senior software engineer. I said to myself, what on earth is that? Because I'd never been called that, right? And then he said, well, based on your experience when you talk to other people, I was like, I don't know, right? It's a journey. You just get started. If you want to be a senior software engineer or a senior ML engineer, you have to start from being, an entry-level engineer, a junior engineer, mid-level engineer. Whether or not you are called senior is a function of the organization that you work at. Now, typically, there'll always be a job description, right? So if you want to go for a job, if you decide that, today you want to be called a senior ML engineer, just go find all the job postings for senior ML engineer and look at the requirements. And if you fit the requirements and you get the job, congratulations, you're a senior ML engineer, right? But I don't know about that. Really, if you are getting a job, just get a job and do the job. Whatever they call you, they could be paying you $1 million a year and they call you an intern. Does it really matter? So there are some problems that are Lagos specific problems, and let's stop having those problems, right? Go get a job, look at the requirements, train yourself, acquire the skills, get that, and after a while they have to promote you, right? So if you start as an intern or a junior, eventually you become mid-level. It might take you 2 years, it might take you 5 years. It really doesn't matter. As long as you're paying your bills, and you're not living off of anybody, you're fine, right? Yeah.
Okay, so that makes sense. I believe, so I am. I believe, so I apply, and then I get the job, so I become. So basically. All right. So my next question is actually also about the availability of jobs, right? Particularly for Nigerians. As someone who has been in the space, I picked up machine learning at some point, and I was making progress with it, and then I began to try to apply to jobs, and then I realized that we do not really have the market here in Nigeria. Nigeria is still we are still in the process, but we are not yet in the process. We are believing that we're in the process of gathering data, but we've not even started gathering the data, right? So it's a bit of a problem. Actually, not a bit. It's a huge problem because homegrown talents are not even able to get the experience they need at home. So you have to compete globally for even little experiences. And competing globally is not the problem until when you realize that the people you are competing with are Indians who have been doing math since they were 5 or 3. They've been doing calculus. I'm so sorry. But this was my experience, and I was like, I'm not even that good at maths. Goodbye. Right. So yeah, so there's a problem of the availability of jobs, particularly for homegrown talent. So how can they tackle that? How can they get to the point where they are actually able to get these jobs? Now we're talking about globally because in Nigeria, we are being honest, it's not there, and actually compete globally because people they are competing with lie the noise to go off them. All right, so yeah, thank you.
Yeah, so interesting problem, but like you said, right, the world is a global village, uh, and we have petty problems that we need to deal with. So yeah, you're competing against people who have been doing math since they were 5. But here's the bigger problem: even if you had the jobs locally, they would still come over and take the jobs from you. Uh, 2 weeks ago, I found out that there's an animal called the honey badger. And the honey badger specializes in collecting food from anybody, including lions and tigers and stuff. Someone said, how exactly are you the king of the jungle if one honey badger can fight 5 lions and collect their food? So the problem is not the availability of the jobs. problem is whether you're good enough to get the job. That's the real problem, right? If you're not good enough, every other person will eat your lunch. The world is not a global village. It really doesn't matter where you live. You don't want to know where I live. But I live somewhere in the back of the woods. I have solar, I have Starlink. Problems are solved. Grid has gone down 10 times this year. I really don't care, right? The only problem that you have is if you need to see me physically, we need to decide who's traveling and how long it takes. Okay? So, are there jobs? Yes, there are always jobs in the world. Are you good enough to get the job? That's the real question, right? Now, why aren't you good enough to get the job? That's the important question. Is it because you're busy watching Premier League? Is it because you're busy, wasting your time? Because again, these guys who have been doing maths since they were 5, do they watch Premier League? You get? So you can't eat your cake and have it. If you want to be good, decide to be good. Stop spending 90 minutes a day or how many minutes watching football or playing Call of Duty or whatever it is that you're doing, and just focus. Okay? If you're good enough, you'll get the jobs. The jobs don't need to be in Nigeria. If the job is in Germany, you'll get the job and decide whether you want to work remote or whether you want to relocate. That's your own cup of tea, right? You can get a job in Nepal or wherever, somewhere too cold for you to live, and you can work remote. So, are there jobs? Yes. Are you good enough to do the job? I don't know. Go figure.
All right, so basically lock-in season. All right, I feel that. So my next question is about the people, machine learning engineers typically, a lot of people they know how to work the models, they know how to build the models, and then there's the part of deployment. There's the part of working with cloud. How can you balance both? As someone who has experience in both cloud and machine learning, how can they balance both? How can they get to the point where you are actually able to work end to end without maybe another party, so to speak? I think back when Heroku, I think was I don't know if they're still operational, if they're still free. Back when they were still free, then as far as I know, a lot of people were building models and deploying straight to Heroku. I'm not sure that's the case right now. So for people who want to get to that point of expertise where they're not just building it, they are also maintaining it, they're also putting up the infrastructure for it. How do they get to that point?
Okay, so again, that's where reading docs comes in. GCP lets you do that, obviously. But you have to read docs. And this isn't a GCP masterclass, but there are some things you can do using the UI. There are some things that you have to do using the CLI, right? But it lets you do it. Now, these things are usually not learned at the same time, right? So it depends on the size of your team. If you have a team, then people can specialize in different things. There are some models that you can deploy directly. There are some models you need to containerize. There are some models you need to use things like TFX for them. Google Cloud has an entire AI section where you can do stuff, but you need to learn, right? Bottom line is, these things aren't secret. You don't need to join a cult to figure out how to do these things, right? They're actually well and properly documented. All you have to do is decide to stop watching some things and go and watch some other things, right? Decide to stop playing Call of Duty and go and read docs. Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. Again, the bottom line of that was lock in, focus, leave Premier League, leave movies, and touch dogs. All right, no problem. So my next question is about the future of machine learning or AI as it is. In the past, say 5 years thereabout, there's been a huge boom, right, in this space. We've seen lots of companies investing heavily in AI models, in LLMs. We have so many different LLMs right now. Some of them are tailored to some things, in quotes. Some of them, and they're also good on different levels. We have, AI has hallucinations and all of that, right? So currently, we have these things in use, we have them in applications. But what do you think about the future in the next 5 to 10 years? Where are we going to be in this space, in your honest opinion, as someone who has been here for a while?
So I've never been able to answer that question. right? There's nothing that exists today that I could have predicted from 2 years ago. So the key point is for you to just remain relevant, which is what I said, right? I didn't start out as an ML engineer. In fact, when I started out writing C language, um, the only thing that we had, because back then it was called the AI winter, right? People had tried training ML models. Computers were not powerful enough. We didn't have enough CPU. We didn't have enough RAM. So they gave up, right? It was called the winter. And things picked up when we had more powerful processors. But we just kept doing stuff, and then as things got more powerful, things emerged, right? Back in 2015, it was TensorFlow, and you could have PyTorch. Microsoft had something; it died within a year or two. Nobody knew we were gonna have ChatGPT, right? But OpenAI had something called OpenAI Gym, right, which is short for gymnasium, where you go to gym to build your muscles. They had a gym, for reinforcement learning. So reinforcement learning was a thing. You could use OpenAI Gym, but nobody knew how many resources OpenAI was throwing into the gym, right? It also helped that Google was working on transformers separately. But did anybody know that all of these things would come together, right? Because Chat GPT is, chat is just conversational part, and then GPT is, generative pre-trained transformers, right? Nobody knew that all of these things would come together. So do we know what's coming together in 5 years? We really don't know. But again, it doesn't matter, right? What matters is your relevance. Just make sure, your brain stays alive. You're not brain dead. You've not knocked yourself out with something. As long as you're relevant, and then you stay up to date, right? So every 2-3 months something new comes out, you're aware of it. If you're not aware of it, in a year you've lost 4 cycles of something. In 5 years you've lost 20 cycles of something. So if you're not up to date with stuff and you're just waiting to see what's going to happen in 5 years time, what you're really trying to do is predict 20 cycles of innovation. It really doesn't matter, it's not important, right? So just stay relevant in the moment, and 5 years down the road you still matter.
All right, great answer. Thank you very much. We're coming to the end of this, but I have a quick question, particularly for people who do not have a background in the sciences, who did not do computer engineering. I'm not quite sure Nigerian universities today offer data science or even anything related in university. But people who probably, did statistics, for example, probably did computer engineering, they probably have some, what's the word now, some headway if they pick up machine learning engineering, for example. So for people who do not have this, should I say, privilege, right, who studied something else, you studied something totally different, you're coming into this, right? How best can they position themselves? I say this because I've seen machine learning roles that require you to be doing your PhD in data science, or doing your doctorate in something, and it's always a science deeply related background. It's never So yeah, how do they position themselves in such a way that they are not just out of the equation when it comes to this kind of roles?
Okay, so recall that AI is, so let's call it like a specialist, right? So AI models are specialists, but their specialization is in something that is not AI. Okay? So when you think about NLP, yeah, there are researchers who are working to train large language models. But there's a reason why language exists in that, because you need language researchers who are not scientists, right? So if you want to have an LLM that translates to Yoruba, for instance, yeah, you need the ML people, but you also need the linguistics people, who are people that study Yoruba, right? So you can't really separate AI or ML from whatever discipline it is you're interested in, right? If you're building a model for biological sciences, you need doctors, you need biologists, you need stuff. Thing is, you just need to be the best or close enough to being the best at whatever you do, right? Um, so, I have an acquaintance, I don't know whether I'll call him a friend, but, Kola Tubosun, who is a linguist, studied linguistics. He's still a linguist, but he has worked on and off with Google a few times, I think when they were doing the language program for Google Maps, he was involved, and some other things. So usually, in any industry, right, you don't have to be um, knowledgeable in just the technology that the industry uses. So for instance, when we talk fintech, everybody assumes you only have software people in fintechs. Yeah, that's a fine assumption until you have a legal problem and then you realize that you actually need lawyers, right? And lawyers don't need to turn into fintech people. They just need to know law, and they need to know trademarks, and they need to know patents, and they need to know stuff, right? So if you don't have a background, and I'm not saying you can't switch, it's fine to switch. The just thing is that sciences teach you a certain scientific way of thinking and reasoning and approaching things, right? And if you come from an arts background, you don't have that reasoning. But it doesn't mean that you can't bring your specialization to that. So usually the problem that you have is when you look for AI roles or ML roles, then they give you the requirements for that ML role or AI role. But when they're done hiring those people, they then go and hire all the other people that you need that will label your data or annotate your data or do whatever, right? Or bring their own specialization. And they're not hired under AI or ML. So you don't see that. But everyone has value, right? But you must have value. You can't be, what's the right word? You can't just be the person that came out with a pass, right? And then you now want to work in that field. No, so they need, top-notch individuals, researchers. Everybody must bring his or her A game to that field. But you don't have to pivot. You just have to be extremely good at what you do.
All right, thank you very much. A round of applause for him, please. So, thank you. So my last question is this. What's your advice for, machine learning enthusiasts, upcoming machine learning engineers, people who are interested in ML, AI, whatnot, right? Particularly in Nigeria. What's your most profound advice for them right now?
So my advice would be it's doable. While we like to make things sound extremely complicated, a lot of the time they are not that complicated, but you have to be your best.
All right, so you just have to be your best. So I'm going to allow just one person from the audience to ask a question. Just one person. All right, yeah. Come forward, don't worry.
Okay, hi. So you've been working in the enterprise for 20 years, right? Or 20 years plus. That's longer than I've been alive. And I'm sure you've seen, that every field has their hype cycle, This is in, that's in, and AI is no exception. Recently nowadays, okay, I guess what I want to say is how do you deal with problematic management that just want to just follow the hype cycle? Okay, there's like this software engineer I knew, like they're really good, they're really cracked, and they tweeted one time they were like the MBA is the natural enemy of the engineer because the C-suite they're always making unrealistic demands sometimes even, right? Even okay, in fact, yesterday I saw an article about Gemini. Gemini, Google's AI, right? They're like, oh, it's now available on iPhone. I use a Pixel. And I'm like, oh, might as well get into it, right? Has that nice interface. And I open it and it's like, I want to replace Google Assistant. And if you use Google Assistant, it's useful for, oh, just tell me this, tell me that, do a calculation, that's fine. And then I guess it and I'm like, hey Google, what's 4 times 5.5? You didn't hear it, but it said 2. It just said 2, and you understand. This is the 4th time I did. I did it twice yesterday. I did it twice today, and so obviously you realize that within Google, right? There's the engineers who understood LLMs, maybe they read the attention paper. They're like, oh, it doesn't actually do math. It can't do this, it can't do that. And then you know that there's a manager at the top who is like, remove Google Assistant. Get that. We want that Gemini. We want that investment AI buzz. Right? And so I'm just saying, as someone who's dealt with this for a really, really long time, and I'm trying to start my employment even, and I just finished school, so I'm freshly unemployed. That's my career. But someone who has done this for a really long time, how do you deal with management when they can't see what you, as a very seasoned dev, see?
All right, that's a very good and very important question, and I've dealt with that sort of management. You just need to be at peace with yourself. Yeah, so you can probably tell from the way I'm seated and the way I talk that I'm actually at peace with myself. There's a very good reason why I don't live in Lagos. I live in Lagos on and off, just as long as I can deal with it. So you have to PT management. And PT is a very important word. So you need to understand management, what happens, especially when they have investors. So before they have investors, they have this brilliant idea for a startup or a company or whatever. And, they're going to change the world, they're going to get to the moon or to whatever planet. They all have these plans, right? But then the moment you take money from investors, you're no longer in control. You still have the title, but you're no longer in control. The problem is the rest of the staff in the company think that you're still in control. That's where you start to have this contention. So you assume that this guy should be smarter than this, or she should, whoever the management is, male or female, right? You assume that they should know what's going on and they should be able to make a proper decision. Truth is, they might know what's going on, but they can't, right? Because they go to a board meeting and the person, who's in charge, the real person in charge says, you must do this. And they don't have a choice, right? Understand that even Steve Jobs got fired from his company. Okay? So they don't have a choice. They're just there. If there's hype here, they get to the point where the board says jump and they say how high. Okay? All right. So now the board has said jump and then they come to you and you say, dude, we're not jumping. Right? You just don't pity them. So you need to figure out whether jump is going to crash the ship or not. That's what you need to figure out. If we jump, are we going to crash this ship or not? If we jump, how many months do we have before the ship crashes? Okay? And the answer to that, of course, is if you have 4 months before the ship crashes, then you have 4 months to get a new job. Yeah, because the ship is going to crash. So sometimes you can tell them, look, this thing that you're asking for isn't going to work, it's going to crash the ship. And they're going to say, okay, hold it, let's not do that. Sometimes you're going to say, this thing is going to crash the ship, and they're going to say, you know what, burn the ship down. Right? So just have pity on them, right? Because they're not in control at that point. If they want to go with the hype, let them go with that. There was a time when everybody's startup idea was blockchain and AI, right? And I always told people I didn't even know what they're talking about. For an ML person, ML is the last thing I want to add to anything. I want to understand the process. I want to understand how this thing works, right? Because what ML is supposed to do is just make it work faster, make it work better, make it more accurate. But ML is not the idea. ML, I tell people, like, we buy cars, we don't buy mechanical engineering and electrical engineering, right? So why are you selling AI? You need to sell a product. Now, the secret sauce to the product might be AI. It's fine, right? The secret sauce to a Mercedes is some sort of physics somewhere, some sort of mechanical engineering, some sort of electrical engineering. But that's not what people go out to buy. People go out to buy luxury, or they go out to buy, speed, or they go out to buy even efficiency, right? Some people want a cheap car. It's engineering that makes the car cheap, but nobody sells engineering, right? People sell cheap cars and stuff. So I don't know if I've answered the question about management, but the answer is just manage them, right? they're at that point where they just need to be managed. Sometimes you might even find a better way of implementing that hype, and then they'll take all the glory. They won't even thank you. They won't say, "Oh, we asked him to do A and he did B, but everything works. We're fine." Yeah.
All right, thank you very much. Please a round of applause for Mr. Robert Joy. We've come to the end of this session. Thank you so much. We really appreciate having you around. Thank you very much. A round of applause for him once again.